So with my client here, I'm going to be doing the 7 physical assessments for flexibility. And the first one is the Thomas test. And the purpose of this is to see if the client lacks flexibility in the hip flexors. So I'm just going to ask you to lay straight on your back and grab right here and try to bring it, right there. Try to keep it like 90 degrees. All right, that's good. And then try to repeat with the other leg. That's good. And so for this test, my client was able to get you can put your leg down, was able to get both of his legs 45 degrees. So his hip flexors do not lack any flexibility. And the next test we're going to be doing is the passive straight leg raise. And this is to determine if the client lacks flexibility in the hamstring. So for this test, I'm going to have the client lay straight on his back, and I'm going to take his foot and see if I can get it fully 90 degrees. You could tell me when. And then I'm going to do that again with the other leg. And with neither of those did my client struggle getting his leg up there or stop me or tell me I was going too far. And so his flexibility in his hamstrings is fine. And the next test is going to be the shoulder flexion. And this test, if the client lacks flexibility in the pectorals. And for this, I'm gonna ask the client to move up a little bit on the thing and then lay on your back and put your arms back. And if you can start from the front and then try to bring them all the way back. And if you can get them all the way to the floor, then that's good. Okay. So I can see my client can touch the floor with his hands and they don't remain in the air, which means that he has good flexibility in that area. And so we can move on to the next test, which is the shoulder extension. And this test, if the client lacks flexibility in the pecs and the anterior shoulder and biceps. And for this test, I'm gonna have my client lay on his stomach and try to raise his forearms 45 degrees in the air, backwards. So I can see that my client can't get the full 45 degrees, and that's okay. It just means that this muscle is not as flexible as the rest of them, and this could be worked on with multiple stretches. And we can move on to the next test, which is the internal shoulder rotation. And this test determines if the client lacks flexibility in the external rotator cuff. And for this test, I'm gonna have my client lay straight on his back and put your arms out and then curl them and then try to raise them 45 degrees off the floor from there. Make sure both the arms are straight and then try to raise 45 degrees from there. I can see that my client has no problems raising 45 degrees from there. So that means that he has good flexibility in his external rotator cuff. And now we can move on to another test, which is the external shoulder rotation. And this test determines if the client lacks flexibility in the internal rotator cuff. So I'm gonna ask him to lay on his back again and do the same thing he was just doing, but put your arms out like that, and then try to bring them down to your sides. And then I can see that my client doesn't struggle with this at all. So he does not lack flexibility in his internal rotator cuff. And that brings us to one last test for flexibility, and you can stand on your 2 feet. And I need you to take one arm and put it behind and then try to reach with the other. Okay, and then you can switch and do it on the other one. Okay, so as you can see, my client cannot touch his hands, and that's okay. That just means he's not as flexible in this muscle area as others, and this can be worked on and improved to eventually reach both of his hands touching each other at this test. And that's all.